Welcome to the final Council planning meeting of 2023. Do you have any apologies for absences?
We've received apologies from Councillors Bashforth, Cosgrove and Holbein.
Thank you. Any urgent business items? Any declaration of interest?
Chair, I'm not so sure whether there is like a declaration of interest at all, but agenda item number 8, the Fox Denton one, me and my colleagues did have a meeting with one of the developers' reps on site. I don't know whether that needs to be declared or not.
I think, sorry, but apologies, Chair.
No,
well, the fact that you've declared, I think the fact that you've notified the committee that you had a meeting, provided you don't think that you committed yourself in any way, you just listened to what they had to say,
yeah,
then declaring it will be sufficient, and then you won't need to leave the meeting during consideration of the item.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Any public questions?
None received, Chair.
Thank you. Then item number 5, minutes of previous meetings. Is everyone happy with the report? Yep. Can we have it moved and seconded? Yep. Thank you. That's done. Which takes us on to item number 6, site of Bailey Mill, Delft New Road. Can I also remind members that we are live streaming? Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. The presentation that I'm going to go through now will actually cover the next 2 items together because they both relate to the same development and the same development site. The difference between them, as you'll probably be aware, is that one's a planning application and one's an application for listed building consent. In addition to that, you'll note from the report that the recommendations that we're anticipating from committee tonight will be slightly different in the sense that the planning application is within the remit of committee to make a determination either way. The listed building consent will require, because we have objections from statutory heritage bodies that we had to statutorily consult, if committee are minded to grant approval for that application, then it needs to be referred to the Secretary of State. But nevertheless, we'll be looking to committee to make a resolution one way or the other on that. And as a result of that, as the Chair will probably point out, that there'll need to be 2 separate votes at the end of the proceedings on each of those applications. So this is an application that relates to a site on the southwest edge of Delft. Delft, as you know, one of the villages up on the Saddleworth Moors. It's on the road that leads down towards Dobcross on the southern side, and then obviously the Oldham Road on the northern side of the site. So these are the images from aerials. So as you can see, the site itself is actually referred to as Bailey Mill Ruins on Google Street View, and obviously the second image gives you the indication of the site boundaries. If you look at the top left-hand corner of that is a couple of little bits that come in. That's the existing rows of terraced houses that are located on Oldham Road. So this is one to show you the site itself. So the history of this site is obviously the mill, very historic, developed over a century in time, but has been vacant now for quite a strong period of time. There were applications, as you saw in 2015, for various elements of demolition of the site and for, and in principle, granting a planning permission for redevelopment. Also in 2015, the site was listed, and that included the original main mill building and all the other ancillary buildings around on the site. However, the following year, there was a fatal fire on the site, and I'll show you actually, there's a picture of that on the presentation. So at the moment, the site is in a clear state of dereliction. So these are just to give you the frontages of the site. So this is the Delft New Road frontage. You can see the chimney in both images there, which is clearly visible from the site. The main mill buildings themselves are set back some way from Delft New Road, and although they are visible, the remaining buildings are fairly low lying, so it's not a particularly prominent feature from there. These are views from Station Approach. So Station Approach, which is a cul-de-sac which originally served. It's an area where the original railway sidings were that served the mill. That was redeveloped for a housing scheme, and you can see from the images on the left the properties on there, and they are facing towards the site. So in the first image, for instance, that on the opposite side of there would have been the original main mill building, and the largest of the proposed replacement buildings will be there as well. The next slide shows you Oldham Road. So Oldham Road is the frontage of the site, and in this instance there are two buildings which are visible, which are part of the development site. The first one clearly visible in the first image, that's the former office building, and as I'll come to, it's proposed that that be retained and converted. It's probably harder to see the old warehouse building in the background. It's proposed that that will be demolished and replaced by a new block. The right-hand image is again to show you the houses I referred to initially, which are on Oldham Road, and these back onto the site. And it's not clear from those images, but the land levels fall away quite steeply at the back of the site. So, for instance, those two-storey houses have a lower level on the other side of the back of them. This is the proposed layout, and as I say, includes a mix of properties on the site, mainly a replacement of the mill building with a four-storey block of apartments, which is the same scale as the original, for conversion of two of the remaining mill buildings, but for demolition of many of the other structures on site, and then for the erection of some separate housing units, so detached, semi-detached, and a small mews block of buildings. Now, one of the main planning issues that will come to into determination of the site is that the site involves development within the green belt, and that area takes up approximately a quarter of the overall site. In normal circumstances, there's a need therefore for in all circumstances, a need for very special circumstances to be demonstrated to allow development in the green belt, particularly in this instance where there's no present development to be replaced. Those very special circumstances will come to relate to the heritage value of the site, but there are also issues, obviously, its derelict condition and whether without that particular development in the greenbelt land this would actually be a feasible development. We've had a viability appraisal carried out on this scheme. That's been independently assessed as well on our behalf, and as you'll see in the report, what that indicates is that either with this scheme or with a scheme that retains more buildings on the site, the profit levels are below the kind of 15–20% that would normally be expected. So there are issues with viability of the scheme. However, the scheme that's put forward provides a better degree of viability than others. So the consequence of that again is that normal requirements in relation to affordable housing and public open space and any potential contributions towards education facilities, the scheme will not be able to produce those. So again, that's an issue for committee to consider. So the image you can see, the green area obviously is indicative, that's the green belt land on the site. And from the lower image you can work through on that. So this is an area of housing that you can see on the left hand side. So the value of that to the development, particularly the conversion scheme, is an important consideration in this scheme. The area that's in the green belt, so you can see there, it's quite naturally vegetated area that rises up towards Oldham Road. On its southern boundary is the Delft Donkey, which isn't a public footpath but is a well-established right-of-way, and that then runs straight through the site. So in terms of the buildings themselves, this is Bailey Mill. So as you can see from the main image on the left, this is the original structure, main reason for it being listed, of course, and you can see the subsequent consequences of the fire in 2016, which effectively gutted the building. There are some small elements of that building still retained, and these have obviously been assessed as part of the structural survey. It's looked at all buildings on the site, but it's not considered appropriate that these would be retained as part of the development. What's proposed to replace it is a 4-storey block of apartments. And as you can see from the two images, the intention has been to obviously try to reflect that style of building in a modern vernacular style. So obviously garage is on the ground floor, that's slightly different than what's there now, but again to get that vertical emphasis of the windows on the site. In terms of relationships with neighbouring properties, therefore, this building has the same relationship physically that the building that would have been there previously would have had. Obviously these are residential units on there. The upper floors of these flats are basically bedroom windows, so there's a potential element of overlooking a cross-station approach as a result of that. This is the office building, so obviously this is its condition at the moment. The left-hand image gives you obviously the ornate frontage onto Oldham Road. The second image shows you obviously the levels as the site falls away. So as I say, this is intended to retain this structure, and the next image is to show you how that would be. So obviously, particularly the more prominent element onto Oldham Road, that would obviously be retained, and then obviously conversion of the building will take place on the lower levels within the site. The West Warehouse and Chimney, now these are the other buildings that are to be retained on the site. So obviously the West Warehouse is the one that you can see in the middle of the image, and obviously the chimney is the chimney. There were some issues in terms of determining the application about the chimney. It was originally intended, there's a brick section at the top, a later brick section that will be removed. It's now proposed that that will be retained in its totality, and obviously would act as a centrepiece for the development, and obviously also give an indication of the history of the site. And you'll see there's a condition about obviously building around that and making sure people, for instance, using the Delft donkey, can better appreciate the past of the building. These are just other images of the building that's to be retained, and then obviously showing the images of the conversion. And as you can see again, Oldham Road from the top image, Oldham Road's on the right, Delft New Road Station Approach on the left, and obviously the building takes advantage of that into the landscape. The chimney, as I say, now proposed to be retained, and as you can see, particularly from the second image, the brick section of the top of that, there are objections from heritage bodies to that change, and the applicant has altered the application to suit. The next building, prominent on Oldham Road, now this building is proposed to be demolished. Structural surveys have been carried out on the building. They've not necessarily indicated that it's not capable of conversion, but the cost implications of that obviously add to the development costs on the site. So as a consequence of that, it is proposed that that building will be replaced. You see it on the right hand side, second image down, that's the view that you would get from Oldham Road. So this is the prominent view. The 4-storey view is the one that you would get from the site, and it's effectively located at the back of the site, behind the chimney and behind the West Warehouse that you saw previously. The next building, you can see from the top images, this is the weaving shed. Again, the structural survey indicates that there are issues with retention and conversion of this building. So a replacement block of 3 houses is proposed, and as you can see from the roofscape of that, it's been intended to actually reflect the original style of the building on site. Now, in the centre of the site is the old boiler house, the old engine house areas of the site. The objections that we've received from the heritage bodies, particularly the Council for British Archaeology, they wish to see these buildings retained, but there are 2 issues associated with that. One is, as you can see from the images, the condition of those buildings. They're in some of the worst elements of decline on the site. But also, we need to make this a feasible housing development site. And it would be difficult to retain those buildings in the positions that they are, to get, for instance, the car parking requirements that you would need on site and the open space, amenity space around the dwellings that you would need with that. So we're happy as officers that the justification has been put forward for removal of those structures. Elsewhere on the site, we've got new housing proposed. There's a mix of different units, as I said earlier on, but they've all been designed again to try to reflect the style of the buildings that will be retained. So you'll get, they'll appear as modern. I think we know that, but they will be reflected as modern versions that respect the character of the main building. As I say, there are relationships with some properties on site on Oldham Road. These are just to give you an indication of that relationship. So you can see the levels fall away. In this first image, effectively, there is a property behind the terrace, but it's at a lower level, and it's been designed in a way that habitable room windows have been minimised on that elevation. So this particular property, for instance, mainly faces out towards the open space to the left. And this is the building at the centre of the site, and again you can see that there's open areas that will be retained at the back of that building, so the outlook from there won't be significantly impacted by the development. Now this is first of all the station approach element. So you can see on the left hand part of the first photograph, that's the remnants of the original mill building, so that's effectively the position of where the new apartment block will be located, and you can see that relationship with housing on the other side of the road, with some habitable room windows present on that street frontage elevation facing towards the replacement mill building. The image at the bottom, that shows you properties, existing properties off to the northeast of the site. Again, just in the bottom corner you can see the position of the mill building to be replaced in relation to those properties. And this is the proposed layout again. So as I say, the main issues here are that this is a site that's lain certainly unused for quite some years. It's highly unlikely it would ever be redeveloped for any purpose without a comprehensive redevelopment scheme of the site. Ideally, we have a responsibility under Planning Listed Buildings Conservation Areas Act to give additional note of the historic heritage of the site, and that is a primary consideration. If approval is given to demolish listed buildings, then obviously there has to be very strong reasons to outweigh the harm that has been identified or will be identified in removal of structures or even in conversion of existing structures. In this case, as I say, the condition of the site, it's an important site in Delft. It's one that's prominent as you get into there. It's an important site, I suppose, in the borough as well in terms of its prominence in those areas. This officers are satisfied based on the viability information, the assessments of the buildings themselves structurally, and the capability of conversion is the best scheme to bring that forward. So there will be a significant benefit of this development to the area from that point of view. But in making that decision, members have to be convinced that obviously the loss of other historic buildings on the site is justified, and of course that the intrusion into the green belt itself can be justified. We're happy that the green belt intrusion in this case will not be significant in terms of the purposes of the green belt. You know, it doesn't bring together, there's still a large gap between Dobcross to the south of the site and this site. So it's recommended that the planning application be approved. It's also recommended that committee resolve to grant the listed building consent as well. And as I say, if members are in agreement with that recommendation, it will then be referred to the Secretary of State. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham, for that in-depth presentation. Can I ask members, yeah, okay, I've got a few hands up already. So Councillor Hints, then Councillor Davies, then Councillor Harkness. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Just a couple of points I'd make. You've used as a justification to approve this because the site has not been used for a long time and is in a derelict state. I mean, we could say that about Stonehenge, couldn't we? But we wouldn't use that as an argument to build on it. So I'm just wondering how strong an argument that is in terms, because I think the key thing here is it is a heritage factor. I accept that the site has diminished considerably, but I still don't believe it's totally beyond repair. Well, rejuvenation, should we say, more in line with to what the bodies have suggested, the historic bodies have suggested.
Yeah,
Thank you. Councillor Ince, yeah.
Yeah, through you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, we totally agree. In an ideal world, then yes, we would look to get all these buildings retained, but the information that we have in terms of the viability, no developer is going to take on a scheme that doesn't produce any profit. And the profit on this, from the information that we have, and it's to say that information has been independently assessed, tells us that there is no realistic prospect of those buildings being retained. But also from a planning point of view, I think there are difficulties in constructing a scheme that works within the context of all the buildings that are there on site. I think what we get out of this, from that heritage point of view, are buildings that would retain that character. So even the ones that are being retained, it's sympathetically being developed around those buildings. So I fully appreciate that in an ideal world, no, you wouldn't do that, but we have to look at the site, and the fact that it is in derelict condition, it will remain in a derelict condition. As you know, officers have powers to take action to tidy land and so on, but that doesn't solve the long-term issue on the site. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davis.
Thanks, Chair. Really on the same grounds, I was beaten to it really, but I suppose everyone was thinking the same. But kind of, what cost would it be to do this? What is the difference in costs? I know you said it, you know, nobody would develop it, but what would be the difference? Because if there's never going to be a prospect of it being redeveloped, then obviously in the buildings that are already there, they're just going to get worse and worse, aren't they?
Yeah, do you, Chair? And then that's actually an important element as well, is that they will decline, because they're in a poor condition now. Say they've been disused now, what, for probably getting close to 10 years. Obviously they're open, you saw from some of the images, they're open to the weather. They will similarly decline. That's of no benefit to the heritage quality of the site. So that's not going to help bring the buildings back into productive use. And as I say, I think the scheme that's been proposed does the best it can to work within those parameters, and you know, will retain as much of the character as it's possible to do.
Thank you. Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So this has been a site which has been a problem since I've been around, elected since 2012, and for that. And I know the owners have tried to develop this for many years, and they've come across a lot of obstructions and and difficulties to do so because of some of the things we've discussed already, and obviously the fire makes it even less viable. And I know the main sort of building of that, I know years ago when they were looking at that, the way the windows were positioned meant that it was going to be very difficult to make it viable to have that as accommodation anyway. But I know if you go on that site at the moment, like I said, there's lots of people who've been dumping rubbish, and I've even seen chemicals and all sorts of things on there, and it's a real mess, and it's a danger because we've had kids going in there and things like that. And I know lots of applications have gone through before, and I think it is credit to you, Graham, that I think you've worked with the developers to try and come up with something which sort of tries to reflect the heritage as much as possible, because it's a very difficult site to develop. It's going to be costly, and I think you know, so in the past, I think, where the
Councillor
applicants...
Hartness, sorry, is there a question in there?
Yeah, there is.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah, I was just sort of responding a little bit to some of these comments, a couple of the comments made to try and put it a little bit into context. But main point was, it was actually just around, so it was to do with the access. Now, I think the officers put a condition in now relating to the access, that's okay. But there was another point about access to the Delft Donkey. Just checking, is that what that is at the bottom there? Or have we still got access to that on the site? Because that was one of the objection concerns, wasn't it?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Yeah, the Delft Donkey continues to run through the site. So at the moment, it obviously follows the old railway line through the site. The new access road, which you can see on the image, will actually be continuing. So on the south side of that, so effectively as you go to the bottom left-hand corner, that's where the Delft Donkey will come into the site. Right. It'll then run through the site alongside the footway, and then as part of the Section 38 agreements for actually creating the access road on there, obviously at some point you have to cross that road, so appropriate drop crossings and drop curbs will be put into there. But there's no intention of preventing that use through the site from continuing, obviously running alongside a road. Never ideal if you want a country proper, but the Delft Donkey as well, for most of its route, it's a you know, it's a properly surfaced path, it's not a country field path. So yes, there is no consequence for that route. Obviously during construction we'll try and make sure that it's kept open as much as possible, but obviously the safety of users is as important as that as well. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Charters.
Thank you, Chair. I've just got a quick question around the section of the report about viability, and especially around the fact that there isn't any affordable housing as part of the development. Now, I know we've discussed this many times in planning around having affordable housing and what that means, but I was just wondering why. I know we're saying it wouldn't make it viable, but is there not any way we could have worked with the developers to make a viable site that would have had some affordable housing? Because as a former resident in Delft, I know that there isn't much affordable housing in Delft.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. Again, it's the same issue that, you know, obviously for a contribution that we make or for them to put affordable housing on site, that increases the deficit, if you like, on the viability of the scheme. The one thing I would say about the scheme, particularly for areas like that, is that we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 bedroom properties as part of this scheme, which, as members know, quite often in these kind of areas, it tends to be slayed more towards the larger units on the site. So it does give possibilities that you perhaps wouldn't often get for people, you know, not just large families, but other people to move into a effectively attractive site. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Hinds, final question.
Councillor Charters very kindly took the words out of my mouth in many respects with that. So I just want some clarification here, because this is obviously a significant development in a affluent area. So it's, you know, ultimately the markup on this, I imagine, is reasonable. Now it's been confirmed there are no plans for any affordable properties on there, and I use that term loosely in any event. Is the contractor going to make any contribution to Oldham Council's fund, like as in what I've learnt with previous developments? Are they going to pay Oldham Council something towards affordable housing somewhere?
Thank you, Councillor Hinds. Graham.
Well, I think the answer is no, simply because of the viability. The ideal start point is always we get affordable housing on the site itself.
Sorry, I think the starting point should be appropriate housing within the borough. You know what I mean? So I find it very, very difficult to take on board a development of such magnitude. There couldn't be a written-in contribution to the funding that Oldham Council has for affordable housing. So I'm not, personally speaking, I'm well aware of the need to make profit, but I think that's got to be balanced off. And you know, these factors, other factors, are asking us to roll back on, i.e. the green belt intrusion, and obviously the heritage side of it. So I find it absolutely shocking, really, that such a contribution hasn't even been requested or discussed. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hints. I'll pass it over to Peter, who can clarify the situation on that. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, so first of all, no one said it hasn't been discussed or sought. The starting point, as per the local plan, is that yes, a development of this size, this amount of housing, should make an affordable housing contribution. But national planning policy says if there are viability challenges with a development, that can be a reason for saying, okay, it can't be afforded in this case and there are other benefits to the development that means it should still go ahead. And in those situations, we have to forego the affordable housing. It's not about whether it's on-site or whether it's a financial contribution. They're the same. It's just different ways of providing the affordable housing. It's simply the case that in terms of the way the viability is done, the way the national rules are around how viability is assessed, you have to assume a certain amount of profit for the developer, because as Graham said earlier, if there is no profit, then no one will do anything, no one will build anything. And so in this case, the scheme we've got to is just about viable. Adding any further costs in that, whether that be converting more of the buildings rather than replacing them, whether that be asking for a contribution towards open space or towards affordable housing or anything else, it will tip it over the edge and it is no longer viable, and that would mean the development could not happen. So we have to weigh all that in the balance, and simply, you know, this is not a straightforward application. You know, we've had it since February. There's been a reason why we've taken this long to bring it to you, because we wanted to work with the applicant, try and find the best possible scheme, but it is a finely balanced scheme. We are asking, we are looking at the situation and recognising, yes, it's impacting on Greenbelt, yes, it's impacting on listed structures, no, it won't provide affordable housing, but it will still provide housing, a good mix of housing, and it will address what is a derelict and unsafe site at the moment. So and that's what we have to weigh in the balance, what the committee has to weigh in the balance tonight to make a decision.
Quick point. Thank you for coming back for that to me. It gives me great reassurance that you've obviously considered these things, particularly in lieu of the profit aspect. So could you advise me and the other members on the panel how much profit has been identified in this development?
While Graham's looking it up, just to give some context, so again, the national guidance I was referring to about viability assumes that a developer should be expected to make at least 20% profit, okay? And that's 20% on the gross development value.
What is the gross development value, please?
Councillor Hints, please let him speak. Thank you.
In this case, I'll let Graham give you the actual figures of what the percentage of profit.
Yeah, the details of this actually are in the report under the viability section. So 12.5 indicates that the profit on this scheme, and again, this has been assessed. In fact, our independent assessment actually said it was probably going to be even less than indicated. So the viability appraisal says 11.67%. The indication that we've got could be as low as 7.62%. So as Peter said, you know, you'd look at 20%, 15 normally as an absolute minimum. So any potential developer on this site has got to look carefully at whether this is actually going to produce a return that involves the investment. And there's a lot of work involved in this. And of course, I would also add that things like, because it's a heritage-based site, the quality of materials, for instance, we will be looking for a high standard on there, perhaps more so than you would on other sites. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
It's relevant, my point.
No, excuse me, Councillor Hints. I think we're going to move on to the speakers, so if you can hold off on that.
He did give me a figure. He gave me a percentage. I asked specifically for a figure, i.e. how much is the development going to be worth, i.e. I can work the percentage out then. You've just given me a percentage, it doesn't mean anything.
Well, I think from the figure that they've given, it indicates obviously how much profit they're going to make. They can't foresee how much exactly that's going to be. So based on the percentage, yeah. But you can come back and ask that question later on when the wider discussion, okay? So now we'll move on to the speakers. So we have objector, Peter Buckley, on this. Right, okay, I'll quickly move on to Councillor Hazel Gloucester. It's a quick question, please.
Yeah, it is quick. Just in terms of the green belt, I can see right from the start that this needs developing, although it looks like a very sneaky way of expanding the development. There's reference in the report to say that it could previously have been part of the railway operation from the site, but surely it would have been designated brownfield as the rest of the site will be. So do we know when this was designated as green belt on the site?
Thank you, Councillor Gloucester. Graham? Yep. What? Or Peter?
Can I maybe reinterpret your question a little bit there? Because I think there's two things there. One is about green belt designation, which is purely a policy designation. So off the top of my head, I don't know the exact date of when the precise green belt boundaries were set in Oldham Borough, but it would have been decades ago in terms of when the actual green belt was set in. That's slightly different from the context of whether it was part of the actual mill site or not. And I think in terms of what the report says, there is some suggestion that it might have been, but there's no certainty on that at all. So the fact is that from our point of view at this point in time, it is a greenfield site. It's not previously developed, that part of the site, and that's why it was included in the green belt originally.
Just to continue, just to continue what Peter was saying, and as you said, whether it's a greenfield site or a brownfield previously developed land site, what the applicant says is that it was used for storage areas primarily in connection with the mill operations, but there's no indication that there were buildings or structures on the site. So when we look at the definition of what is previously developed land, this is not termed to be previously developed land, and even if there were things like hard standings on the site, nature has long since taken over that. So it is effectively a greenfield site in the green belt for those two elements of it.
Thank you. We'll move on to the speakers. So we have Mr. Peter Buckley. Thank you. You'll have 3 minutes, and the officer will tell you 30 seconds before your time's up. Thank you.
I am speaking to this committee as an objector to the plan because of the proposed housing development at Bailey Mill on Greenbelt and within New Delft Conservation Area. The mill was built in 1863 and was listed by English Heritage in December 2015 due to its historic architectural interest and industrial context, being nationally important in the wool industry of West Yorkshire. The mill suffered a fire on the 14th of June 2016, and the subsequent emergency demolition authorised by the local authority and the conservation officer, which took place, exceeded the levels of demolition agreed by the structural safety reports. A new application was then submitted in September 2016 to demolish the main part of the mill together with the finishing and blending shed. This was refused permission because of the substantial harm to the listed heritage asset which remains relevant to this application. The proposed development does not accord with the local plan, which is the relevant document for the adopted development plan for Oldham. There are many issues that have been raised by objectors regarding the plans, and they are as follows, and the majority of comments on the planning portal are in objection. The proposed access road via station approach that is located just off Delft New Road is a safety concern due to the increased level of traffic movement that will be generated, visibility issues because of parked cars near to Gateshead Business Park, and increased noise and pollution levels. The Oldham Road warehouse is part of the listed building, has potential for saving from demolition as highlighted by various statutory bodies due to the lack of evidence in favour of demolition. Existing listed buildings at 8, 10, 14 and 16 Oldham Road would be negatively impacted because of the loss of this historic asset, and there is a statutory duty to protect it. 25% of the development proposed is on Greenbelt and comprises of 8 houses of 3 and 4 bedroom plots. This goes against the fundamental aim of Greenbelt to prevent urban sprawl by keeping land permanently open, to safeguard the countryside from encroachment and to preserve the setting and special character of historic towns. The applicant has claimed that the Greenbelt area had formed part of the operations of Bailey Mill and railway sidings, but there is no evidence of this. Historical maps show no sidings or mill operations. NPPF paragraph 154 states that the local planning authority should regard the construction of new buildings or other development as inappropriate, and the application does not fall within the exceptions within this. A large number of trees are being proposed to be felled, Especially
30 seconds.
especially in the Greenbelt area, these trees are of varying maturity and they act as a natural barrier between the existing 19th century terraced houses and the several industrial units located in Gateshead Mill. Replacing existing woodland with juvenile trees does not compensate for the loss of older trees on the site. Biodiversity of this site has a number of recommendations to support wildlife, particularly bats, birds and mammals, and planting trees to conserve and what is already there. However, it is not clear what biodiversity will be lost.
That's time.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Sorry. Any questions for Mr. Buckley? No, thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker, Mr. Jason Kennedy. Again, similar thing, 3 minutes, 30 seconds before your time's up. She'll let you know. Thank you.
Dear councillors, as you'll be aware, Bailey Mill is a former woollen mill that has been derelict for some 20 years. Some buildings are structurally dangerous and are not capable of meaningful or viable conversion. Some land contaminated from previous uses, including the small area of Greenbelt, which was the former waste tip that served the site and the railway sidings. The area of Greenbelt being the waste tip for the Bailey Mill operation. In the centre of the site is a large mound, and this is clearly visible if you visit the site. This is the waste tip. The mound is the result of 100 years of waste to include railway clinker and ash and clinker from the mill operations, as well as other waste products from the mill. The site has self-seeded over long-term underuse, and the tree covering is mostly of ash trees, identified and confirmed by the council's tree officer as having ash dieback. The applicant is in agreement to provide for an off-site compensatory tree planting scheme on land within the Delf area. The green belt is essential to the overall viability of regenerating the site as a whole, and without the green belt the scheme just would not be viable as a project. Therefore, there are exceptional circumstances to justify this small parcel of green belt land being used. As outlined in the report, one of the latest developments on the site is proposed to be replaced. The building is a stone-built warehouse and acknowledged in having structural issues to include roof replacement and some localised bulging to the stonework. A new roof is required and works to stabilise the building against the large retaining wall, in addition to other costs with repair and reuse, are such that it's not viable to retain the building. Whilst the building is listed, it was the last of the buildings on site to be constructed, and as such there is a slight mismatch between the quality of the building to be demolished and the quality of the other buildings to be retained in terms of the stonework. The planning application therefore deemed the buildings to have slightly less architectural merit than other retained buildings. Both viability reports confirm that retention and reuse of this building instead of replacement would prove extremely costly and would tip the balance to the viability of the project as a whole. Given the conflicting issues between heritage, greenbelt, new buildings and amenity, we believe that the scheme before you is the most viable, and both viability reports confirm that the scheme is the most viable development that is deliverable. The application confirms that there are broad-based public benefits which outweigh any harm. Reinstating and improving part of the Delft-Donkey route, removing derelict buildings which are incapable of reuse, removing contamination from the site, providing much needed new housing in the area, restoring, bringing back into use listed buildings and structures, good quality design and architecture, jobs and training opportunities, and no impact upon residential amenity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Does any member have any questions for Mr. Kennedy? Yep. Councillor Hinds, Councillor Harkness afterwards. Thank you.
You okay? Just wanted to see if you could answer a question that I couldn't get answered from the planning department. In terms of spend for this project, i.e. cost, what's your ceiling figure?
Well, all this information is contained in the viability reports that you've had sight of. Now, the costs of the scheme fluctuate from when the original viability report was done, which was nearly a year ago, to when the most recent viability report was done just a few months ago. Costs have inflated.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I can't give you that exact figure, I'm afraid. You'd have to look through the viability studies.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. I'll get Peter in on that.
Just to clarify for Councillor Hinds' benefit and for the applicant's benefit, the viability study isn't available to the councillors. Obviously, it's something that, for commercial confidentiality reasons, we cannot publish. So obviously it's entirely up to you whether you want to release figures and what have you, but it's not something that we can publish or give the actual figures tonight in the meeting.
I'm happy to. It's a transparent process.
Well, could you give me a figure then?
Yep.
I haven't got the
Sorry,
report
Mr.
on
Kennedy,
me.
just to clarify again, as the officer said, it's your discretion whether you want to expose that figure or not. But as a council, we're not going to do that, but it's up to your discretion. Thank you.
If you feel it's beneficial to give a copy of the viability report to councillors of this committee, I think that's acceptable for them to. Yeah. But I can't give you a figure, but it's the applicant is allowed to make a small profit, but.
Sorry, with respect, in the society we live in, the applicant is...
Councillor Ince, can you go through the chair, please, and let the applicant answer the question? Thank you.
As it's been indicated in the committee report, the applicant only makes about a 9% profit of the gross development value, and I don't have that figure with me at the moment, I'm afraid. But even that profit is questionable because it fluctuates given to the cost of materials, labour, and all the other things. So it's
Thank you, Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, I don't need to ask about viability, which I was going to, on the tree planting, usually the standard is really about two or three trees per one lost. Is that something which you'd be planning on doing?
yes, the council's specification is 3 trees for 1 loss. So whilst most of the trees on the site are ash, they're ash trees with ash dieback, they would be placed for 3 for 1.
Thank you, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. In regards to the viability of the site without the 25% of the green belt, can you explain why it reduces, in what way?
I'm not the viability surveyor, but without the green belt, the scheme just doesn't work. It's as simple as that. That's it.
Thank you. Any further questions for Mr. Kennedy? No. Thank you for your time. Yeah, Peter will come in on Councillor Harrison's question.
Yeah, I just think it's helpful to clarify in terms of the question asked. Again, it's not. I'm not going to go into precise figures. There's no need to in some of this debate. The reality is the reason the green belt is needed to make this development viable is obviously when you have a greenfield site and you're building more, should we say, standard housing in terms of what the typical layout and what have you of a house that potentially is more not profitable, more valuable, more higher value houses in that sense, then what you're able to do is offset the costs that developing the brownfield part of the site, so of renovating listed buildings and what have you. Because that's where, as Graham alluded to before, the materials are expensive, the cost of those conversions, the cost of rebuilding, replacing some of those buildings in a way that's sympathetic to the heritage, all of that costs a lot more than a standard development. And so in this particular situation, not always necessary, but in this particular situation, the applicant has said we need a bit more greenfield, we need a bit of greenfield land where we can develop houses more easily. That the cost, the benefit of that from a financial point of view offsets the greater costs of the other parts of the site. And in this case, obviously, because of where it is, it just happens to be that that part of the site is in the green belt. Obviously, if this was another part of the borough, it wouldn't be green belt. It's just because of the nature of where we are.
Thank you, Peter. I now open the floor for discussion from members. Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, and I appreciate Mr Evans said this wasn't necessary in Councillor Harrison's case, but I just do want to record in the public setting that I have once before met with the applicant and associates to discuss these proposals, if I can just record that. But I do have some comments to make as well.
Thank you for that clarification. Yep,
Thank you. So, ordinarily, I would be very much with the objectors on the grounds of the loss of the heritage assets and on the Greenbelt front as well. But I think we do have to appreciate that this site has very limiting characteristics, both in terms of its physical nature and the financial implications, the viability, which has been discussed a great deal. Personally, my view is that the actual industrial heritage of the site is being respected in the proposed plans, the design of the new aspects, and I do think there is need for housing, and as I object quite strongly for using ordinary greenfield sites, I do think we should look to bring back into purpose these brownfield developments as well, and it would also remove what is presently very unsightly and potentially dangerous, the dangerous physical aspects of the site. So I'm going to stick my neck out because I am a ward councillor here, so I know I'm here as a committee member primarily, but of course I have a particular interest being a locally elected member. On balance, I do think that due to the viability and the other limiting factors, this is a suitable development. I think there will be lots of benefits in terms of the creation of residential units and the sympathetic design codes employed. So I'm happy to support the development, appreciating that it's not ideal, but we have to work with what we've got. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lancaster. I think we had Councillor Harkness. And then
Yes, so like Councillor Lancaster, in the past I have spoken with the owner of the site to discuss, Bailey Mill and the issues there. And I'd like to echo to what Councillor Lancaster just said there. I think it is a very difficult site. It has been for quite some time. And I think there's been attempts to develop this site a lot in the past. And I know the regeneration team at Oldham Council were all in favour of it and saying, oh yes, we need to do it. And then in the past, it got stuck at planning. And I think it's credit to Peter and Graham who have worked with the developers to try and incorporate some of that heritage, as Luke says there, into the project to try and get something which is a bit more amenable, which can sort of can come to where they can recommend approval as planning officers, and we can get a site which is derelict, it's an eyesore and it's dangerous, and something needs to be done. And for me, I think if after all the work that's been gone on with, which is working together with the developers and the planning department have done to try and come up with something which is suitable, if then this is then refused, then I'm not quite sure what is going to happen with that site, because it will have cost, I'm sure, to keep that security and that safe and sort of tidying up the mess and stuff over many, many years will have probably cost an absolute fortune. So whilst we talked about gross costs and stuff like that and how much costs have spiralled and things like that, I think we also got to probably think about how much does that cost over many years to try and keep that site as safe as possible. So at some point, obviously, if we can't get something done there, which I think, we need more houses inside of. I'm the first one saying we shouldn't be generally building in Greenbelt. I oppose building on green spaces. This is a previously developed site for the majority of it. It's an ideal site which is in the designation for housing and for residential development. If we can't get something which is like this through, then I'm not quite sure what we can get through.
Thank you, Councillor Harkness.
Yeah, and I'd second.
Sorry?
I will also second Luke.
I don't think Councillor Lancaster
Sorry, I
formally
probably
moved
didn't
it.
use
That's
that
why
terminology. I will formally move it. Happy to.
Right,
Thank you.
Before we take that, I think Councillor Hints had his hand up, so I'll allow him to speak. Thank you.
I'd just like to summarise. So we're being asked to infringe on Greenbelt. We're being asked to, against historic bodies, alter our cultural listed building. We're getting no contribution in terms of affordable housing or a contribution to this pot that developers can make, and it's all for an indeterminable amount of profit developer. So I'll be voting against.
Right, so it's been formally moved and seconded. So we'll take the vote now, unless anyone has any extenuating comments that they want to make. So, sorry, yes, I'll bring in Graham to clarify Councillor Hince's points. No. Oh, sorry, apologies. 1 second. Oh, right, okay, yeah, sorry. Yes, just to clarify, there's two items, agenda on this item, sorry. So we're going to be voting on the first one. Yep, Councillor Woodbine.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just wanted to clarify Councillor Hince's remark about no contribution to a pot without mentioning what the pot is. I assume that Section 106 payments will be made? No?
No, that was confirmed earlier on.
Was it?
Yes.
In this one?
Yes, about 10
right.
minutes ago. Yep. I think, Peter, if you want to... Yep, it was clarified. Yep. It's not called a pot, it's called a contribution.
Ah, right. Well, Councillor Lancaster said they refer to it as the pot, so in future meetings, can we refer to it by the technical terms, please?
Section 106 contribution, there is... yeah, Peter can come in on that, thank you.
Just for clarification, contributions are made, they're provided, you should provide the facilities on site, as we've heard. If you can't, the developer pays a contribution in lieu of that to spend, for the council to spend elsewhere. Insofar as there's a pot, the money is allocated for that particular purpose within the vicinity. But in this case, viability means that there is no contribution required.
Councillor Davis.
Just briefly now, because I think we're coming near the end of this. What it's all about, this is releasing this greenbelt land, and none of us are really in favour of that, are we? But it makes this project viable. The alternative is we've got a wreck here, if that's the right word for it, a building that's collapsed. A load of other buildings is no use for. They're just going to get worse and worse. It's for the greater good. That's what this is all about, for the greater good. That's what's being given to the local community. Nice properties for people to buy. That's what it's all about, as the way I see it, so I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. As it's been formally moved and seconded, I'm going to go straight to the vote now. So all those in favour of item number 6 for approval? Against? Abstentions? That passes. Thank you. Right. Yep, so now we move on to item number 7, which is the listed building consent. Pass it over to Graham. Yep. Peter, sorry. Yep.
So, yeah, just again to clarify, obviously we've already done a presentation, it's the same site, so this is now a question of whether one of the committee members wants to put forward a motion to resolve to grant listed building consent subject to what to the Secretary of State potentially calling it in, because whenever a listed building is affected, the Secretary of State does have that power.
Councillor Harkness? Yep.
I'll move, Chair.
Thank you. Anyone to second?
Seconded.
Thank you. Straight to the vote now. All those in favour? Against? Abstentions? That passes. Thank you very much for your time. Okay, we move on to item number 8, which is phase R4 of Fox Denton, and I'll pass it over to Graham. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Chair. This is another application for residential development. This is a site that members will have come across previously. It's the latest phase of the development of the Fox Denton strategic site, which has previously had a hybrid approval for a mix of residential and commercial uses. As members will probably know, that development's well underway. Some of the industrial units now complete, and some of the earlier phases of housing are now complete as well. So this is just giving you that wider area. Obviously the areas that you'd see in brown on there are part of development sites. So in the kind of central area there, the kind of semicircular site, that's phase 5 and phase 6 of the development site, which members would have dealt with, I think, a couple of years ago. That's well underway, is nearing completion now. The site that we're now looking at is immediately to the southwest of that, which leads down to the rear of properties that are on Fox Denton Lane. So it's this particular field that you can see there. So as I say, on the southern boundary, you've got the back gardens of properties on Fox Denton Lane. The main access to the site will come in, and you can just see the new access road at the top right. That will then continue. At the moment, it does a kind of swerve into the site. That's just onto the construction access that currently exists. It will follow a more direct route into the site, as you see on the layout shortly. So it's development of that field. Immediately to the northwest of the site, there's a more wooded area that then falls away towards the brook, and that area is the area that's previously been allocated as the linear park. And part of the requirements of this development will be a financial contribution set out in the report, and a bit more information given on that in the late list report, for a contribution towards a phase of that linear park to come forward. And that's something that's happened with the adjoining phases as well. What you can also see on there is that the roadway that appears to then come down in a kind of southerly, southwesterly direction and then run round the back of the houses, that's the old farm access, and it gives access onto Foxdenton Lane. At the moment, construction access for the existing developments is taking place off that area, and it's proposed that construction access for this development will also take that route, except for these houses actually with timber framed properties, and the large frames, because that's quite a narrow access, will come off the main estate access road where the existing development is taking place. On completion of the development, that route will be retained as an emergency access, and also obviously will then provide improved pedestrian and cycle access onto Foxdenton Lane. So these are views across the site as it originally was. So obviously, I say a greenfield site, but one that has long had an established outline permission for residential use. This is the development that comes into the site. So as I say, it's an extension of the cul-de-sac of the main estate road. The properties on the western side, the land levels fall away towards the brook. There's an area then of open space that is provided on there, and the replacement tree planting will also take place on that area of the site. As I said, towards the bottom right, that would become the emergency access into the site. So this is a fairly more routine, should we say, residential development. All the space standards are met in terms of separations between properties within the site and to existing sites. They all meet the national space internal space standards on the site. These are just views, areas onto Foxdenton Lane. So this is the left-hand side is where the temporary construction access comes out. The right-hand side, there was original proposal for a footway there, but that would have resulted in some additional loss of trees, so that's been deleted from the proposal. And these are just a couple of images of the properties on site. So there's a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bedroom properties. These will be, the development is on behalf of a housing association, and these will be shared ownership properties, which, as you see in the report, give people who don't have the finance at the moment the opportunity to get on the ladder, and then obviously to build that up with the ultimate intention of purchasing the whole of the property. So again, from an affordable housing point of view, this is the complete opposite. This is a scheme that provides affordable housing across the whole scheme. Again, just these are the typical 3 bedrooms and site layout. Now, they will be subject to a legal agreement for the reasons set out in the report. There are financial contributions, and these follow through from the original hybrid application, and they're set out in the report. So again, as with the listed building application, what we're asking committee to resolve to grant permission subject to us completing, and we're actually quite some way down on that point of view, completing the legal agreement, and then for the head of planning to issue that decision once that legal agreement has been signed. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Any questions for the officer? Yep, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I've gone through the report, and I'm just wondering if you can tell me what the percentage net gain of biodiversity is. It's not, the percentage isn't actually within the report.
Yeah, I'll find that for you. Member's got other questions, but it is, as Member calls it, it's at least a 10%, which is now going to be required, statutory requirement under national guidance. The elements of that will be achieved, obviously, are also in the linear park, so it's the contribution towards the linear park as well. But even within the site, you get things like bat and bird boxes are being provided within the development site itself. But I'll see if I can find you a precise figure.
Thank you. Councillor Charters.
Thank you, Chair. I've forgotten one. Oh, there. So, in the consultations, it does mention that Greater Manchester Police were consulted, but no comments have been received. I was just wondering, did we chase that up? Because obviously I know antisocial behaviour is a big consideration for a lot of residents, and I think if we're getting consultation from Greater Manchester Police, we should be getting an answer from them at least.
Yeah, Chair. I have to say, this may be a simple resource issue, but we have found recently that this isn't the only site where the police are not able to respond to developments. But there is a crime impact statement that has been submitted with the application that makes various recommendations in terms of the security of the properties, and it's a requirement that statement and the measures in there will be adhered to as part of the development.
Thank you. Any further questions for the officers? No. Okay, Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. It's not actually a question, it's just on the application report. It states that the ward is Chadderton Central when it's actually Chadderton South. Right.
Will that be rectified?
Yes. Just on the biodiversity element of it, it actually is in the report there. So at 12.2. And it mentions the achievement of 17.9% biodiversity gain. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Yep. So we'll move on to the speakers. So we have Natalie Rea. So again, you'll have 3 minutes, 30 seconds beforehand. You'll be notified by the officer. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I need to read my original objection? Because I sent some questions in today and nobody responded, so I'm not sure what to read to you.
How you want to use your 3 minutes?
All right, okay, that's fine then. So I'd like to ask a few questions, if that's okay. Being a resident of Foxdenton Lane since 2021, the leaflet dropped to residents was the first I heard that there was going to be property built behind my house. By all accounts, it's been some form of an informal agreement, but during conveyancing of buying my property, it didn't come up in any searches. I'm not sure whether it should have done. Another question is, what mitigations are in place for the noise pollution in the area? As Radcliffe Green that is being built at the moment, the noise from that building site is appalling. So coming closer to residential buildings, it's just going to get worse. Another question is, following on from the lady's question earlier, about the biodiversity in the area. I don't think 3 bat and bird boxes suffice. The foxes, there's hedgehogs, there's a variety of birds and wildlife in that backfield. And from the reports I've seen, I don't think it fits the bill, what's happening for biodiversity. And also, we've noticed people measuring Foxdenton Lane, and we asked a few questions of them recently for the purpose of access, and they deemed it not wide enough. So I'm just wondering, in terms of access to the building site, is it now wide enough? That's the end of my questions. Thank you very much.
Is that at the end of your speech as well? Because, like I said, you've got 3 minutes, so you can read the rest of your speech if you wish to.
I would also comment on the crime in the area, because within the report on the planning application, where we live is a high crime area. So if there's 42 properties behind where I live, which could in terms create 200 more residents, what is actually going to happen in terms of crime? And I think that's all that I've got to say. I've written it all on the website anyway. Thank you.
Apologies, I made a mistake there. You're not allowed to ask questions, but you can raise your concerns.
They're my concerns then. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do any members have any questions for the speaker? Councillor Lancaster.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Could my question be whether the officers could respond to the various concerns?
Sorry, Councillor Lancaster.
Chair, you left during consideration of this item.
Does that prohibit me from speaking on the item as well as
Yes.
voting? Okay.
Apologies, Councillor Lancaster.
No, that's
Councillor Charters.
Can I ask what Councillor Lancaster was asking then, and that we that the officers respond to those questions, please?
Have you allowed that?
At the right point, yeah. That's the point. At this point in time, this is, in terms of the process we go through, is for you to ask questions of the speaker. Then the next speaker can speak, and you can ask questions of them, and then as part of the debate, you can ask the questions of us.
Any further members want to ask? No. Thank you. We'll go on to the next speaker then. Jake Crompton. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening. This application, jointly submitted by Stonebond and Great Places, seeks full planning permission for 42 new family homes, all of which are proposed to be affordable in the form of shared ownership tenure. The principle of residential development on this site is long established, dating back to 2014, when permission was granted for a mixed-use development at the Fox Denton strategic site, also known as Broadway Green.
Sorry, Mr. Crompton, can you just come closer to the mic? You can move the mic slightly towards you. Thank you.
The scheme proposes a mix of 2, 3 and 4 bed family homes, all with private gardens, in-curtilage parking and associated landscaping. The house types are all NDSS compliant and contemporary in style, and will deliver a mix of detached, semi-detached and terrace style properties. Access to the development will be taken via the adjoining R5 and 6 phase, ultimately connecting onto Broadway. An emergency access and pedestrian link connects into Fox Denton Lane and will improve access to services and facilities in the wider area. Once built, the properties will be managed by Great Places, a northwest-based housing association who have an existing presence at Broadway Green with 133 affordable homes across the phases. And then this scheme will take that to 175 in total as affordable on this wider development. Section 106 contributions are being made towards education, and this development will also fund the next phase of Linear Park, providing recreational facilities to existing and future residents, as well as delivering biodiversity enhancements. Circa 50 new trees will be planted within the development, which is in excess of the 3-for-1 replacement planting ratio. And overall, the proposal will deliver a well-designed, safe and attractive affordable housing development that will meet Oldham's identified housing needs. There are no outstanding objections from the officers or statutory consultees, and the scheme does not conflict with policies within the adopted development plan for Oldham. I acknowledge there will be some, obviously, disturbance during the construction period. That's inevitable with every construction site. But as I say, this is a smallish scheme. We've got a build period of around 12 months. And as Graham alluded, this is a timber frame development, so a lot of this stuff is actually manufactured off-site and delivered into site to sort of reduce disruption to residents in the area. So, taking account of the committee report, we respectfully request that the application is approved in line with the officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Hinst and Councillor Harrison.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So, obviously it's, as you've stated, shared ownership, in effect affordable housing, which is obviously something we feel we all need in Oldham. Obviously you can't get that in Saddleworth, but that's another matter. I just want to ask, obviously one of the concerns raised by the residents is a valid one, and that's obviously the interference during the period of construction. Is there any way you could set up a contacts forum group or whatever with residents to hear their concerns? Because obviously I work in the building industry, and I understand these things are often overlooked. Would that be something you're willing to facilitate?
Yeah, so the application is supported by a construction management plan which is approved through the conditions, and in that we commit to community engagement. So before we start, we'll do a leaflet and letter drop to residents with site manager details, contact details. So yes, we are prepared to engage. Through the construction, as you'll know, through construction, you have British standards, so monitoring noise and that sort of thing. So again, those practices are employed during the construction build process.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. I do have a couple of questions, so can I ask them one by one so the answers don't get mixed up?
Yeah, I'll allow you to, and then if anyone indicates, then yeah.
Thank you. It's in a similar vein to Councillor Hintz's question. Obviously, we've received a lot of complaints from both Fox Denton and Milton Drive with regards to construction vehicles going down. Now, obviously, green pastures, for example, that's almost done now, but it is still an issue. So what are you actually going to do to mitigate those issues, and how long will residents have to put up with the construction for, please?
Yes, our build programme is roughly 12 months. As I say, it's 42 units, relatively small scale, and a lot of it is off-site construction, which makes the build process quicker, because your timber frame's coming in, it's sort of manufactured on site, and then brickwork on the outside. So you're not sort of doing traditional construction, which takes longer. Larger delivery vehicles will come via Broadway and R5 and 6, but we are proposing to use the track for smaller vehicles, in terms of site visitors, plasterers, that sort of thing. There's a longer term benefit here. I appreciate the short term disruption, but the 2014 application had access coming off Foxdenton Lane, so all those 200 houses were coming onto Foxdenton Lane. It's been delivered in reverse, so longer term, that should benefit the residents of Foxdenton Lane to not have all those cars coming out onto Foxdenton Lane. So I appreciate and acknowledge it's a short-term disruption. We'll have the construction management plan adhered to, it's approved, and we'll try and minimise disruption as much as we can. But I appreciate there'll be short-term disruption during that build process.
Thank you. Your next question.
Yeah, thank you. Just to come back on that, I know that it is short-term disruption, but one of my residents did have the wall knocked down. So I'm just wondering whether you can do anything with work with National Highways or anything to get better signage for the workers. And then my second question is what measures will be taken to ensure contaminants don't actually reach the brook? I couldn't see anything within the report, and to ensure existing wildlife is not inhibited.
So in terms of the wall you mentioned, obviously R5 and 6 is a different developer. So we're not delivering 5 and 6. So we will take precautions and be cautious. Things like we'll probably do some photographs surveys before we start to make sure that things are kept as existing, and obviously if anything we damage, we'll repair. In terms of the brook and contaminants, there's at the back of the construction management plan, there's a bit of detail. So there'll be fencing along the northern boundary, if you like, with the brook. And then what happens is you put a bit of a monoflex on there to prevent dust going through, and then you put a sort of a soil bund at the bottom to prevent anything leaching down into the brook. So they are sort of protection measures that widely acceptable to sort of JMU and the Environment Agency to set measures down to the brook.
Thank you. Is there any further questions for the applicant? Nope. Thank you. Right. We'll move on and we'll open up for discussions. Councillor Akhtar.
Just what my previous colleagues raised in terms of asking the officers to comment on the issues raised by the objector.
Yeah. I'll pass it over to Peter. Yeah.
So I think some of them have probably been answered by what the applicants already answered to, presented and answered some of the other questions. So to take them in order as I noted them down, in terms of the land search or notification of this development, obviously there's been an outline permission on this wider site for quite some time. Obviously I don't know when the lady purchased her property, but that should have appeared on any land search. So if it didn't, you have to take that up with your surveyor. Your solicitor, sorry, in relation to that. But say the outline permission was granted in what year, Graham? Top of my head. 2014, again, before my time here. So yeah. So obviously, the principle of developing housing on this site has been established since 2014. So yeah, that's the background for that. In terms of noise from the building site, I think that's been addressed through what the applicant has said and how that would be addressed. But the bottom line is there is a construction environmental management plan, and that's part of the conditions. So that will have to be adhered to as part of the construction. But as has already been noted, bottom line is when there is going to be some disruption when the construction is taking place, when building work takes place, that cannot be avoided. But it's that short-term paying for the greater, wider benefit of new, in this case, affordable homes for the borough. In terms of the biodiversity, the bottom line is obviously there's a methodology to how the biodiversity is calculated and assessed, And as Graham's alluded to earlier, there is a net gain for biodiversity through this development, and that's been undertaken by professionals in the ecological field who know the habitats and species and what have you. So yes, there is a biodiversity net gain on the site. Access for construction, I think, has been dealt with through the applicant's comments. And so then finally, in terms of the crime, again, it's not for development can't stop people committing crime. All we can do is try and ensure that the way that development is designed minimises the opportunities for crime, and that's what the crime impact statement addresses that's coming with the application. So from those point of views, all those matters have been dealt with through the application, and that's why, among other things, why we recommend this application for approval.
Thank you. Councillor Charters.
Thank you, Chair. So I'm quite actually happy that we are getting more social housing in the borough. I think I've raised it a few times at planning meetings about affordable housing and social housing, and I think it's brilliant that we're actually getting a significant development in that. I think it's really good as well we're getting the Section 106 agreement with funding towards more primary school places in the area, because as we all know, when we're building more houses we need more primary schools, we need more other amenities, and that's a really good thing to see. And I think fundamentally I also think it's really good that this construction management plan's come in, where construction's only going to be taking place during sort of work hours in the week, and sort of, I mean, I know I like my lie-ins on a weekend, but 8:30 to 1 p.m. is fairly reasonable time to do construction. I think this is actually a really good application. I'm more than happy to formally move it, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Hinds.
Yes, I'd like to echo again Councillor Charter's sentiments. I think on the face of it, it's a well-needed development in the right area, targeted at the right people. And just to pick up on just what Councillor Charter said, it's very, very pleasing that a social development can actually make a financial contribution to the community, i.e. through the Section 106, which seems to be lacking in more, let's just say, other developments. So yeah, I'm all in favour, and I'm happy to second the motion.
Just quickly, my colleagues have beaten me to the comments that I was going to make. I mean, I was going to say exactly the same. This is one of the better applications that we've had in terms of in front of us around social responsibility, making a contribution to the site, etc. And that's something that we need to consider for applications that we get, especially in Saddleworth, because we always come up with a reason why developers in Saddleworth can't contribute to the wider community.
Okay, thank you. So it's been formally... Yeah. So just a reminder to members, there's a slight amendment on the late list. So we are voting on the amendment in your late list. So it's been formally moved and seconded. So all those in favour of the application? All those against? Abstention? Noted. That approves. Okay. Thank you for your time. And we move on to number 9. But before we move on there, I'm inclined to take a quick 2-minute comfort break for members. So we're back in 7:25. Thank you. If members would like to take a seat, we'll begin shortly. Thank you. Thank you for your patience, everyone. Oh, Katie's here. Right, I can't even speak now. Item number 7, Boundary Park. No, sorry, apologies. Item number 9 is getting on. It's almost Christmas. So I blame the mince pie I had earlier. Item number 9, Boundary Park. Thank you.
Can you hear me? Yeah, thank you, Chair. Obviously, as I mentioned, this is at the Boundary Park. It's a football stadium, rugby league stadium as well these days, ground. The first plan just shows you the location of the site. It's not particularly good because of the image, so I will put on the image of the aerial. So as you see the main stadium just to the centre of the screen. The area that we're looking at is just to the northwest of that, so it's the oh, I've done that. Oh, I've done that. One of those. You don't. No, hang on. I'm having a technology moment. There you go. Anyhow, immediately to the northwest, you see another pitch. This is the pitch that's known, the main training pitch known as Little Wembley. At the moment it's a grass surface. It has a slope, defined slope on the site, and there are floodlights there, but of a lower standard than now proposed. So the proposal is to upgrade that particular facility, to replace that with an artificial grass pitch, to upgrade the floodlighting on the site, and obviously therefore to improve its usability and the amount of use by both the clubs and the community that can be used on the site. As part of that work as well, there'll be some regrading on the site, which involves lowering of the land levels on the eastern side of the site in order to create a more level pitch. There are residential properties immediately to the north and to the south of the site. So those properties on Downham Close and on Broadway. You can see from the first image, it gives you an indication, so you can see the views are taken from the properties in that little image on the bottom left hand side that show you the relationship between the existing housing properties there and the site itself, and obviously have the usual safety fencing around there as well, the ball stop fencing. The next image, a little bit further round, shows you the properties that back onto the site on Broadway. Again, as you can see, the back gardens immediately adjoin onto that area of the site. This is on the southern side, and there's a little bit of a gap on this side. So there's an area of land that separates the existing houses from the site. That will obviously continue to be made available so people can get through to the stadium from Clayton playing fields as they do at the moment. And these are some images of the pitch itself. So as you can see, it's obviously a grass pitch. There's slight areas around the pitch that are currently some mounding of earth, and you can see the relationship as well with some of the existing houses. So obviously the main work will be to create the improvements to the pitch itself, but also on the adjacent land it's proposed to put new changing facilities, so a new block there, and there'll be improved access from that through to the ground, including wheelchair accessible access that will, because of the land levels being lowered on the eastern side, will be obtained from the western side of the pitch, but with a dedicated pathway, a level pathway that will run through there on the site. And this is just a final real image showing you the view of the site. So the proposals obviously are part of more ongoing improvements to the sporting facilities at the stadium site. What they will do is obviously by creating the artificial surface allow, as I say, more intense use of the site to take place, but nevertheless within restricted hours of use. So on weekdays there will be between 9 and 9, and then on a Saturday between 8 and 6 for the use. number of clubs have been identified that will be able to make use of the site, and in particular Sport England, as you'll see from the late list, have made various recommendations for conditions to be included on the site to ensure that the quality of the replacement pitch is one that meets their standards as well. So on that basis, the application is recommended for approval on the basis of the conditions in the main report and those additional or varied conditions in the late list. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Graham. Do members have any questions for the officers? Councillor Akhtar and Councillor Hinds. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. It's just basically a question on the timings. What are the current timings of the usage of the pitch?
I've not been able to find the original approval, as it was obviously a grass pitch. So, in fact, as far as I can see, that there aren't any established timings on there for use at the moment. Although, for obvious reasons, it's not going to be used at midnight because it's part, obviously, of the club's own operations.
Councillor Hinds.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I see the applicant is Oldham Athletic Football Club, and obviously the thing you've just mentioned from Sports England is pretty important to see it's being used. Like I said, I'm still pretty new to this. Just wondering if you could ask me a question. Will this be funded by Oldham Football Club, or will any of the funding come from Oldham Council?
Peter. Yep.
Well, I mean, firstly, it's worth pointing out that where the funding comes from isn't relevant to the decision before us, but to the best of my knowledge, there's no funding going into this particular project from the council, though I'm sure the agent will be able to confirm that if you want to ask him after you've spoken.
Yep. Thank you, Councillor. Any further questions for the officers? Okay, we'll move swiftly on to the speakers. So we have Susan Halliwell, who's speaking tonight, objecting to the application. So again, you'll have 3 minutes, 30 seconds beforehand. You'll be informed. Thank you.
My main concerns are that I live right near to that training pitch. It's always been a training pitch. We've been there now 40 years. I use my garden often, whenever I can. I do fundraising in my garden. So my real concern is the noise level, the lighting and the times and the days that it's going to be open to the public, and we're going to be sitting there listening to this noise of football. I know you said you now have this special fencing. Does it work? That is my real concern. If it works and I'm going to be able to sit in my garden and not hear a load of noise, I'll be delighted. But I'm really concerned that we're going to go from not having the pleasure of sitting in a garden in the summertime, in the springtime, because of the noise and the lighting. I mean, there's some really big kind of spotlights, if you like, on Latics. It must be near the offices, and they come on every morning at 5 o'clock a.m. and they light up our bedroom. Now, I've got pretty decent curtains on, but I'm going to have to do something about it, because some mornings it literally wakes me up. Doesn't every morning, but there are more, and when it does, it lights up the room, and I'm thinking, oh my goodness. And it's quite a way away from our house, that. And I'm thinking, well, if we've got this lighting and the noise, that is what I'm really concerned about. When we've got lots of these multi-sport 3G pitches about in the lots of the schools, that is my concern. So that's the end of it. Can you reassure me?
Okay, again, it's your 3 minutes of speech, whatever you want to say, but it's not an opportunity to ask questions. But I'm sure the applicant will address those points. But if there's anything else you want to add in your speech time, feel free to do so.
Can I just add this? You know, if all this goes ahead, and for saying sake, I know this is just a concern, because you said I can't ask questions. And the fencing, this acoustic fencing doesn't work. What on earth happens then? I mean, are there real assurances that this fencing works? It's a concern.
Thank you. Do any members have questions for the objector? Yep, Councillor Charters.
Just wondering, in sort of current usage at Boundary Park, obviously, weekday matches and at weekends, how significant is the noise disruption at your house when there is a match on at the football ground?
You can hear it, but you've got to remember when we bought that house, we knew that was there and we knew what it was. So you've got to accept that. I'm just concerned at fairly big changes. That's different altogether.
I was just trying to sort of ascertain how big a difference it's going to be.
Sorry.
I was just trying to work out how much of a bigger difference it's going to be going from what it is currently to...
Well, it will depend how often it's used and the length of time it's used. That's the question.
Thank you. Any further questions for the speaker? Councillor Akhtar.
Just basically question around what I asked the officers. In terms of the current usage, is it used early in the morning on a weekend?
Not, I wouldn't say perhaps 10ish, 10:30, that kind of, and weekend not so often. So not like 8 o'clock of the morning, you know.
Thank you. Any further questions? Thank you. We'll move on to the next speaker, Mr. Richard G. Is it G or G?
You can take your pick. I think it's G.
G. Thank you for the clarification. Again, you'll have 3 minutes and 30-second warning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So, as you've heard, this application concerns the replacement of an existing grass training pitch known as Little Wembley with a new multi-sport artificial 3G pitch, plus replacement floodlightings, plus ball catch fencing, plus acoustic fencing, and a new changing facility which will include a small classroom, office, toilets and a refreshment area. So the driver for the proposal is to provide a better quality, more durable, fit-for-purpose facility which will better serve the needs of the range of girls, boys, junior and youth teams associated with Oldham Athletic. Crucially, unlike the current grass pitch, which is on a slope, bizarrely, the replacement pitch will be entirely flat. It will be sunk into the ground by around about 2 metres at the point of the closest houses, which will assist quite significantly with noise concerns, as well as the acoustic fencing. And the artificial turf base will allow for more intense use, which is the purpose of the application, really. The existing molded floodlights, which are really poor quality, will be replaced with modern, sensitive design sports lights designed to minimise light spillage onto the adjacent housing, and also will enable different sections of the pitch to be individually programmed and lit at certain times with dimmers. Because the existing pitch is grass, it inevitably suffers from wear and tear, and therefore it can only be used on restricted occasions. And if you refer to paragraph 9.15 of your report, that sets out the more extensive use of the proposed pitch. So currently there is no community use whatsoever of Little Wembley. It's limited to occasional first and youth team football matches and training sessions. So in overall terms, we'd suggest that the benefits of this new pitch will be that it will be substantially better quality and fit for purpose than the existing very poor quality sloping pitch. It will be capable of accommodating far greater quantity and variety of usage. Unlike the existing arrangement, it will be properly serviced by its own changing accommodation and facilities. It will be managed by the Oldham Athletic Community Trust to enable a much wider range of club and community uses. It will, in fact, result in significantly lower noise levels than the existing, because of the reasons explained before. Other benefits: 58 trees will be planted, 130 metres of native hedgerow, 2,150 square metres of wildflower planting. The BNG on this scheme comes in at a quite impressive 17.9%, considerably more than the 10% requirement. And it's been designed to sport England's stringent standards, and you've also see the condition about the community use. Oh, and by the way, it's got to cost £1.5 million, which will be invested by the club, not the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Richards. We have Councillor Charters, then Councillor Harrison.
Thank you very much, Chair. I was just wondering, do we know how much an impact this will have on children and teams that play currently on Clayton Fields, are we envisaging a lot of those moving on to playing at Little Wembley instead?
I can't answer that question precisely. I think the intention is to simply make this facility available to the wider community, to different diverse backgrounds. There'll be disabled facilities, and so I think it's to try and cater for people who probably don't use Clayton playing fields, not to displace them.
Thank you. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. The BNG, sorry, did you say it was 17% or 70%?
Sorry, not quite 70, 17.9%.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, if it's going to be open to the wider community, are there set hours that you envisage it will be open by?
Yeah. I think they're in the report, and there's also a condition in there. But it's going to be open every day on a Saturday, and only on a Saturday. It'll open at 8 a.m. Till 6 p.m. tea time, and every other day it'll start at 9 a.m. and finish at 9 p.m.
Councillor Hinds.
Yes, and thanks for the reassurance. Unlike the £1 million we've already handed over, we won't be handing over any more for this well-needed thing. But I just want to ask you, correct me if I'm wrong, because I might be wrong, you're currently training elsewhere, aren't you? The youth teams at Oldham, I think it's in another place in Oldham, which was formerly the Oldham Town Ground, I think. Will that be shut then? Will you be coming away from there? Because I remember lots of complaints about that in terms of it not being fit for purpose, and it was facing really residential people. So would this obviously take that away? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Actor.
Yeah, it was just similar question that I've asked to the objector. In terms of the Saturday usage, why do you need an 8 o'clock start?
I suppose it's the catch of that Saturday morning traditionally in the world of football, and bear in mind there might be football matches at the ground as well. So it's the day where many people want to get up and go and play football and train for football. It's the way that the club works, and that's the reason really.
Thank you. Councillor Charters.
Just to come back on Councillor Hint's point, I think I should help clarify. I believe the stadium we was talking about is where Avro FC currently play on Whitebank Road. And I believe the Oldham Athletic use training facilities at the Chapel Road AstroTurf pitches. So I don't think it's going to have an impact on people at Whitebank because that's a different football club.
Thank you for that clarification. I'd like to ask a quick question. So, that's okay, yeah. Has consultation been taking place with local residents in the area in the lead up to the application, and what steps will you be taking to ensure that the 8 o'clock or the 9 o'clock start doesn't jeopardise, for example, people who work in the evenings and sleep throughout the day, etc.? That's something. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yes, there was a the lady next to me confirmed presumably there has been ongoing dialogue between the new owners of Oldham Athletic and the local residents about this, and I believe there was a specific open evening, wasn't there, where residents were invited?
I don't know because I don't know anything. I didn't know anything about that. We got a letter to tell us what was proposed.
Right.
A neighbour of mine said he came up to have a look at it and told me a little bit more, but I didn't know about that. So I don't think it's been very clear to us all what's been available.
Okay,
in consultation.
Yeah, I think that's where my question was leading to. What consultation would you continue with or start with local residents to make sure they're engaged and are aware of the project and the application that you're putting forward?
Yeah, okay. Yes, certainly, just to go back though, there was a hand-delivered letters to all of the immediate local community, and there was an open event before we submitted the application to sort of present presentation boards and just to explain it. In terms of there is a condition, is it condition 14 in the report, which is all about the construction management plan. So we submitted, unlike many schemes, we submitted a detailed construction management plan with the application rather than kicking it down as a future condition. And that sets out a commitment during the course of construction to liaise constantly with neighbours, to have a representative who's always on hand, telephone numbers and clean the roads and all of that usual stuff is in there. And that's been conditioned. After that, obviously, there is a condition about the usage, which restricts the use anyway. I do know my client, and it's sort of easy for me to say this, but I do know my client, as the new owners, are very keen indeed to get on with the neighbours and to communicate and liaise with the neighbours and do the best thing with the neighbours.
Thank you. Any further questions for the applicant? Councillor Harrison.
Thank you, Chair. Can you explain how effective the acoustic walls are and how they will be in this situation?
I'm not an acoustician. I suppose the obvious answer, well, I think is the obvious answer, is that they clearly do work, because there wouldn't be such a thing as acoustic fencing and acousticians who get involved in these projects. There are 3 points there, really. First of all, there is currently no acoustic mitigation whatsoever. So the report that we submitted with the application makes it clear that currently it's pretty awful in terms of noise. There is no mitigation whatsoever. So, and there are 2 elements which I've mentioned that will improve, and I'm sorry, I'm not a technician, but 2 basic ones, is first of all, in the northern end of the pitch, where it's the closest to the houses, because of this level difference, there's going to be quite a considerable amount of cut and fill to get a flat pitch. And it's going to come down to around about 2.5 metres at that end of the pitch. So you can imagine straight away it's sort of sinking into the ground to about 2.5 metres. In addition to that, and again, we've got a detailed report on this, we've got proper, good, well-designed, fit-for-purpose acoustic fencing along the edge on the top of that. So if that doesn't do the trick, I don't know what will, frankly. I think it will improve noise very considerably.
Thank you. I think that's all the questions for the applicant. Thank you for your time. We'll open up the floor for discussion, members. Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Chair. I welcome the application, and it's going to be a massive improvement to what we've got existing on the site at the moment, and especially the acoustic fencing. But I do have concerns about 8 AM start on a Saturday morning, to be honest with you, and I think that's not acceptable. I would like to recommend 10 AM, to be honest with you, because obviously it's a weekend and local residents want to enjoy their weekends, not have a 8 o'clock start, especially on a Saturday. I love my lions on the weekends, so if I was living there, I won't be happy as well.
So is that a formal amendment to the application?
Yeah, I'm proposing that, yes.
Second that?
I'm probably going to suggest that we don't do that because, I used to, in my older days, used to play football and...
Sorry, Councillor Harkness, because it's been formally moved. I'm going to...
Okay.
I thought you indicated to second that amendment to
No, I'm talking against it and saying that we shouldn't do that.
Yeah, so Councillor Davis has indicated he's seconding. So if you're... Am I not to speak against it? Yeah. Yep, you can carry on with your objection. Yep. It's the amendment.
So I think, the applicant mentioned earlier that obviously people, there's a lot of training and stuff like that, and young people doing football matches earlier on, and obviously you've got to do the training and stuff beforehand, and the warming up and things. So I think a 10 o'clock start would be too late, I think, for the Saturday one.
Thank you. Anyone want to speak on the amended application? Yep, thank you.
Just to sort of follow on what Councillor Hartner said, I in my younger days used to play rugby, and it was a similar thing. You need that time to warm up before a match, and if you're starting at 10 AM, by the time you get into a match and finishing a match, you're getting in towards the end of the day when the facility would be, when it'd be busy and other people would be wanting to use it. So I think an 8 AM start is probably quite sensible, especially for sort of younger people wanting to do sports.
Thank you for your contribution. Councillor Hinds.
I take on board that, but I'm just, if this is primarily a facility for Oldham Athletic in terms of their feeder teams, etc., we're talking about that, not I think, community teams who are, there are many pitches and venues which, I mean, I go and watch my boy play at some ridiculous hours in the morning, 8 o'clock sometimes, all around the borough. So I just want to separate them 2 points. If it's specifically whether Oldham Athletic can train and play before 10 o'clock, or it is a community aspect.
Bring in Peter on that, because I think we're slightly diverging away from...
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's more just to clarify that at paragraph 9.15 of the report, we set out what the 40-hour weekday, if you like, of the use of the pitch would be, and there's a clear reference there that there would be community use hours throughout the week and on the weekends. So it's not just about the club. This is about creating an improved facility that the community can use as well. So just for that clarity.
Thank you, Peter, for that clarification. Councillor Harrison.
Thank you. Can I ask for clarification as well on something?
Yes.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, saying if we approved at 10 a.m. now, and then it turns out that the dip in the pitch and the acoustic wall does work and they decide to come back, can it be amended at a different point?
That's a very good question, and ultimately it comes down to the club could apply to vary the condition at a later date, and obviously, as you say, at that point they might have actual evidence of what's been happening. So yeah, that's something they could possibly do.
Okay, so right, okay. So I've been advised to ask if members wish to make any wider points or have a discussion or ask any further questions based on the amended application of a 10 a.m. start. Pardon?
Don't recall that we actually voted on whether we want that.
No, we had someone move and someone seconded.
So
I'm
that just
inviting for
include it.
further discussion now. Yeah. Pardon? Yeah, Peter. Yeah.
So just to clarify, so the reason I'm raising that and asking if suggesting if there's any other discussion to be taken place is you're not simply voting on whether you change that condition, you're voting on whether you approve this application with the amended condition. So if there's any other matters around the wider application you want to discuss, better to do that before we vote on the amendment.
Can I put an alternative proposal forward then? That
we'll have to take a vote on this, and then if it falls, then we can come back to yours. Yeah.
Chair, can I just clarify? I mean, if members aren't happy with the proposed 10 a.m, you vote against it, then you can move the original. So if you, obviously it depends if it passes or fails. So that isn't the end of it. You do have a chance to actually go back to the original proposal with the original hours.
Thank you. So just to clarify, it's not just the 10 a.m. start that we're amending. It's also we're voting on the actual application, including the 10 a.m. start. If you vote for it, and then that's approved and is granted. If you object to it, then we go back to the original motion of an 8 a.m. start with all the conditions attached and the original application. Is there a question?
Sorry, for clarification, Chair, we're talking about a 10 a.m. start at weekends, aren't we? And then the rest of the week they can crack on at
9 a.m. Yeah.
Yes, right.
That's correct. Yeah. So again, just to reiterate, 10 a.m. start on the weekend, normal on a weekday, plus all the conditions within the application. That's the amended application. So all those in favour of the amended application? All those against? Abstentions?
Chair, it's 6 in favour, 6 against. So you've got a casting vote.
Sorry, I think your numbers are wrong. Can we have a recorded vote, please?
No,
No, yeah, just 1 second. Okay, I vote in favour of the amended application of a 10 a.m. start, just to clarify. Yep. Thank you very much for your time. Next is to note the appeals update report, which is item number 10. Any questions or concerns on the appeals update? Can it be noted? I have one person agreeing. Is everyone else in agreement of the appeals? Yep, agreed. Thank you very much, and that concludes tonight's meeting. Thank you very much for your time, everyone, and have a Merry Christmas and a Jolly New Year.